name is Daniel Holter, and I'm on the core team for Agitare. And we're really excited to have this many people interested in an event that we're hosting. And with that, our guests should be joining us in about 20 seconds. And here they are. All right, Cuss.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Agitare Fishbowl. We were just talking about how I don't think I've joined a Zoom where we told everybody to turn their cameras off, but thanks for everybody for being here. We're pivoting already, and TOGA is going to lead us through a quick Zoom confessions. TOGA.
Zoom confessions, here we go. So we're going to start with everyone turning their camera off. So everyone goes off. Off, 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 off. There we go. All right, now turn your camera on if you've ever been in a Zoom call where you were like business attire up top and like PJs on the bottom. Yes. Nice. All right. I don't want to know what you're doing right now. I'm not going to ask that. Okay. All right, turn your cameras off. All right, all the cameras off, off, off. Daniel Gomez. There we go. All right. Turn your camera back on if you've ever done 2 Zoom meetings at the same time. Some multitaskers. Hopefully not today, though, right? Okay, everyone turn your camera off. Back off, back off. Turn your camera back on if you've ever like pretended you couldn't turn on video just so that you could still like work out during a Zoom call.
Guilty.
Yes. Yes. Slightly out of breath sometimes, but better for it. All right. One more. Everyone turn your cameras off. All right. Turn your camera back on if for some reason that you're still not exactly sure of, Cuss asked you to come speak today in this inner circle of the fishbowl. And
perfect. That was way better than my intro. Thank you, TOGA. I appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. This is Agitare's Fishbowl. I'm your host, Marcus. Cuss is what everybody calls me. Michael Harbin is my co-host today. Daniel is also going to be hosting. And we have a very special event planned for you today where we have invited experts into the interval to discuss how we can enhance innovation and performance through the power of play. So welcome.
But first, who are we? Why are we here? Agitare is a community built of facilitators from across the national security and defense sectors who employ facilitated discovery, problem solving, team building, and design frameworks to enhance the mission, innovation, and transformation efforts of their units, offices, and organizations. We seek to normalize facilitated discovery and design frameworks in policy and workforce decisions in national security by providing a venue for these once isolated innovators and enablers to build a community of practice, find and share support and motivation, and improve their craft. Agitare is currently incubated by Defense Entrepreneurs Forum as part of their mission to promote a culture of innovation in the national security environment.
So the Agitare community team, our core team, we've assembled and we pursue our mission, which is guided by our core values. Our core values are foster a growth mindset, to stay curious, act with empathy, demand inclusivity, and do the work deliberately. So with our values in mind, we aim to deliver these relevant guided discussions to our community to help each other grow, learn, and as TOGA likes to say, become better together. And if you're not in our community, we invite you to join us and where most of our interactions take place, which is on Slack. And I think Dan is going to drop that link into the chat. So if you have Slack or you haven't been on Slack before, please jump on there, register, and that is where most of our daily discussions take place.
So what is the Fishbowl? If this is your first time with us on Fishbowl, allow us to quickly explain the idea behind this sort of gathering. The Fishbowl is a method to organize presentations and group discussions most notably a spontaneous conversational approach to discussing issues and topics within a large group setting. In a physical setting, this would be done by arranging the room so that the speakers are seated in the center of the room and other participants are sitting on the outside of the room in a circle, watching the conversation happen in the fishbowl.
So the fishbowl focuses the entire group attention on the discussion among the 3 to 6 people. So others present become observers, active listeners, and potential participants through rotation process, which reduces the distance between the speakers and audience. So that's normally in a physical setting. The fishbowl is especially useful as engaging in as alternative methods for PowerPoint presentations and panel discussions. So as a way to allow direct conversations with experts as a means of providing noteworthy participants with a prominent platform while still maintaining interactivity. So for this method requires a facilitator or 2. So that'll be the role of myself, Michael, and Dan.
And today we have the pleasure of having Global Master Trainer Jacqueline Lloyd Smith and Global Trainer Coach Stephen Walling from Strategic Play, as well as Dr. Jason TOGA Trew from Air University inside the Fishbowl with Cuss.
Yeah, so the Inner Bowl, we'll be discussing the methodology and theory behind Lego serious play, how applying these methods, and we're going to apply these methods. We're going to share some examples from experience. And lastly, some applicability to the defense community. So get ready, you're in for a big treat.
So here's how we're going to manage the fishbowl today. During this first hour, we ask that those in the inner bowl have their cameras on and mics on for the conversation. Those outside the fishbowl, please turn your cameras off and mute your microphones. And as the discussion unfolds, we'll invite you into the inner bowl if you use the raise hand function. If you have a question that you have prepared or you want to add to the conversation, do that. I will be managing the outer bowl and attempting to get everybody into the conversation as we float those positions in and out. So while you're outside the fishbowl, though, please feel comfortable and more than welcome to add to the conversation using the Zoom chat to everybody, or feel free to add insights about today's session on our fishbowl Miro board. And there should be another link in the chat for you.
Yeah, so during the last 20 minutes, so that'll be the first hour. During the last 20 minutes, we'll open it up. We'll have you turn your cameras on and everybody, and we'll have just an open discussion, and possibly Jackie will run us through a little bit of an exercise. We don't know, that might happen. So if there's no pressing questions, welcome Jackie, Stephen, and Toga. Please introduce yourselves.
All right. Do you want me to go first? I'm the first one
Yes.
to turn my mic on. So there, okay. I beat those guys to it. My name is Jacqueline Lloyd Smith, and I'm the founder of Strategic Play Group. And we are located in up in Canada, but we have offices around the world. I noticed we've got one of our trainers from Panama on this call, so that's kind of fun. Do you want me to say a little bit more about my background, or should we just get everything in?
Tell us why you started Strategic Play and how Lego Serious Play has taken kind of a front seat there.
Okay, sure. So my background, I started my career first going to art school, and then I became an art and play therapist. And I lived in that space for a long time, went into consulting. So I did a couple of master's degrees along the way and went into consulting to help companies improve, basically best practices. And I always thought, boy, if boardrooms could only have art and play therapy, they would be much healthier and more productive, and communication would be easier. And I stumbled upon an article that was in the German Economist on how Lego was developing an application to basically help teams work better during mergers and acquisitions. And so I then started to send multiple letters to Lego, trying to find out what this was. And eventually I went and I took the training, and they had me at hello. As soon as I got there, I was like, this is totally cool. So over time, what we discovered is every time we did anything in the consulting field, whether it was facilitating, training, conflict management, brand development, strategy, all of the things that, businesses do, as soon as we broke out the Lego, our results were amazing. And then we just started bringing Lego creativity and play and we just started to use those creative, playful tools in everything we did because the results were the proof. So there you go.
Thanks, Jackie. Toga, why don't you take us?
All right, happy to do so. So been in the Air Force for a couple decades. Actually, the Academy had the opportunity to fly F-15Cs, which was a blast. Wanted to get out to go to architecture school. That sounded like a great way to like designing context. I love that idea. The economy imploding helped me make a decision to stay. But I was, in retrospect, happy to do so because I've been able to follow a more academic path, which I feel is the best way I can contribute to the Air Force, and it kind of puts me at my best. So went into the Air Force graduate school world as both a student and a teacher, kind of back and forth. That included the School for Strategists, and then they sent me off to a PhD. Studied the history of technology. So I'm a doctor, but not the kind that actually helps anybody. So if like you need like an emergency footnote fix, just call me and I can help you. Otherwise, I can't. My dissertation actually started to expose me to some of the things about play, but it was still all very much in my mind until I got to SOS and started to need to actually apply some of these things, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, so I'll save that. And now I'm a full advocate of play, and I love Lego, and I love the fact that I'm going to beat you to it, Jackie. Lego is Danish for play well, which is just so nice, right? I love it. And I do realize I am mixing metaphors. I've got the Lego astronaut dude and like a Lego aquarium dude. So whatever, we're going to live with the creative tension of it.
Toga, will you just tell everybody quickly some of the design efforts you've recently been leading?
Yeah, so I am like living my dream job right now because I get to do all sorts of fun things with fun people, like all the people that you can see right now. Not obviously, but if you're aware of Squadron Officer School, we teach captains, Air Force captains. They're the 4 to 6 year mark, and we have a very vibrant innovation program, and it changes every 6 weeks, which is great. But we also do stuff with University of Michigan. We've been doing stuff with Spacecom to try to create, try to solve problems, but really try to create problem solvers is really what we're after. And then at this very moment, I am helping lead the design team to imagine what professional military education looks like for Guardians. So for members of our Space Force, which is like 1% intimidating and like 99% exhilarating. So giddy up.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, sir. So I didn't get to do anything as cool as fly F-15s or F-14s. I had to settle for the Space Shuttle Discovery. You got to start somewhere, right? No, but in all seriousness, I had kind of a very interesting, atypical start getting into the creative space. When I was a teenager, I was actually a bicycle mechanic, and I used to sell bikes to people. And then I did that into my early 20s. And then I went to school for guitar building and design, and then studio woodworking, which is really high-end studio pieces. And then I started with Jackie in, I think, 2011. And from there, I have built these tools up, like the Myers-Briggs and like serious play and creative problem solving. And then I went back to school to become a executive coach. And it's just been really interesting kind of how design thread through all of it. And I remember, you don't really see it until, looking backwards in the rear view. But that's me. We've been very fortunate over the last 10 years. I've got to go and work with some really fascinating organizations, including the US Air Force. So yeah, really happy to be here. Yes.
No, thank you, you three, for being here with us and for just agreeing to be in the Inner Fishbowl. So for everybody else that's here today, thanks for signing up. Thanks for coming. What we're going to do today is we're going to be tapping into this knowledge that we have between these three individuals. And we are going to be talking about how, from a theoretical all the way down to the practical application of these practices. So that's what we're going to do today, is try to host this conversation to start with the theory behind Lego serious play from kind of that 30,000 foot level, and then try to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of how that works. Maybe talk about some exciting experiences that these experts have had, and some of the applications that you've seen in the DoD specifically, that maybe some in the audience could take back to the units and explore with their organizations as well. So to get us started, Jackie and Stephen, would you talk about strategic play, Lego serious play from like that 30,000 foot level, and just give us that theoretical understanding?
All right, there. Yeah, so Lego serious play from a really high level. The idea is that you're building Lego models, but you're not building anything physical. So if you were going to, let's say we were going to build something for us all to discuss, what we're doing is we're building metaphorically. And so the Lego has meaning to it. And what people are actually building are small models, which we end up calling artifacts, because every piece of Lego has some kind of meaning, which they give it. So once you think about playing with Lego, it's not what you would have done as a child or seen your kids do, where you're following instructions. This is like free playing with Lego, where the facilitator asks some kind of a question. So we would pose a question or a challenge, and then people respond to that by building with the Lego, and then they start adding meaning to the model that they build to explain some kind of a story. And so the first step in the process is that the facilitator poses a question, then people respond by constructing or building. While they're constructing, they're adding meaning to their model. And then the next step is, once a model is built, we storytell. And people talk one at a time to explain the story behind the model that they built. And then the final step is really invisible, and it's a step where we have reflection or incubation. So as we're listening to other people present their models, and we practice listening generously as other people explain what they built, then what ends up happening is that the information goes into your, you could say, subconscious mind, or it goes into your framework. So the next build that you work on, you're actually building that from a higher level or a higher capacity, because that knowledge is absorbed somehow, either visually because you're looking, auditory because you're listening, or your subconscious mind is also helping. There's also a connection between your hands and as you build, because whenever we give anybody a bunch of Lego bricks, it's the same as if we gave you a bunch of crayons and asked you to draw a picture. As soon as we start giving you these materials, the subconscious mind comes into play. And we like to say that's where innovation lives. So it's like your brain is needs a hand, and your hand needs your brain. That's actually a quote from Dr. Stuart Brown. So this whole idea is what creates these models. And then as the models are built and the story starts to develop within the group of people that are building, then you can start moving the models around. So it's not a static model, it's a dynamic model, which is one of the most brain-friendly ways for humans to communicate. So if you think about the fact that language has not been around that long, so humans prior to having language used artifacts in order to tell stories, like rocks and sticks, or drew pictures. So it's a very brain-friendly way for us to understand. And on that note, the most unbrain-friendly way to understand anything is PowerPoint. So it's the absolute opposite. So if you hate PowerPoint, you probably would really like this 3D built together model.
I love it. I think Toga is going to take us to the stratosphere.
I'm gonna go to the bososphere. So if that's 30,000 feet, I'm gonna go spaceman, like 200,000, cislunar. I don't really know all the space terms, but I'm trying to pick them up. Okay. One thing I'll add to that, which was a perfect description of Lego serious play, is, what is play, right? Like, because it's kind of one of those things, like, it's like the butterfly, pretty butterfly. You think you know what it is, and you catch it and you tack it down, and you're like, what is this really? Like, it's not what I thought. Well, I was like flitting around my head. And it could be lots of things, right? And so there's lots of academic, I'm nerding out right now, right? There's lots of scholarship around play. It's a social thing. It's educational. It's imagination, playing with wild ideas. It's storytelling, which is sometimes described as cognitive play with patterns. There's like embodied knowledge, our ability to grasp ideas. It's like this subversiveness, even like kind of positive deviance. It's playing with chance. It's playing games, but it's not only games, and it's also like competition as well. And I say all that because it's easy to get lost in all that, what it could be. So I like to bring it back to playfulness, because sometimes we're not playing, right? We're not involved in an activity that we would generally consider play, even with that kind of global definition. But you can always be playful, right? And that's like a sense of lightheartedness, reframing, holding your hunches lightly, irreverence, kind of like this active, like, let's get involved and just see what happens. And when you are doing Lego serious play, you can do it about serious topics, but you can still bring playfulness to that. And I think that's an important like bridge from all these things that are play to like, I can be playful even in a serious setting.
Yeah, I just want to touch on one thing that I heard Toga kind of allude to, just kind of skim the surface of, which is the playfulness aspect. That psychological state is such a important element here. And I can't help but bring up, the whole concept of James Carson's finite and infinite games, because he talks about, finite games being inherently serious and infinite games being inherently playful, and getting into that playful state where you're not just playing within the boundaries, but you're playing with the boundaries. And, like I always think back to Calvin Ball, right? I don't know if you're any Calvin and Hobbes fans here, but the most exciting, innovative states that a team can get into is when they're actually like, well, what if the rules weren't this? Like, what if we played a little bit with roles or some of the predetermined notions about what is possible? And that's something that I really noticed about the Lego serious play, that it kind of embraces that Calvin Ball-esque kind of like playfulness and gets people into that mindset with the goal of having, we're reaching goals, but we're not like, there's not a strict pathway that we're going to take there. It might be meandering or muddling through, right? And you end up with surprising outcomes as a result of that approach.
And I'm just going to jump in on that, because I think that the whole idea of Lego serious play, if you think about the fact that humans are wired to play, like this is a work of children. When they're born, they're wired to survive, and they learn through play. That's how they get their knowledge. And anyone who has children knows that they absorb an absolutely incredible amount of information in a very short time. And that they have to play. If children don't play, then they become depressed, there's all kinds of psychological problems that happen with children that are deprived of play because they have to play. So if we think about play, and as adults, and I think that Toga just busted out like the definition of play, it includes anything. It could be physical play, it could be yoga, it could be going for a run, it could be building something, it could be following the instructions and putting something together. There are so many different things that are actually can be defined as play. And then this idea of being playful and having a playful mindset is really one that we want to explore, because this is where we're going to do a better job of creative problem solving and strategy and all those other things that are things that adults do. One of the things that Lego serious play does, and I think we're on a bit of a mission to do, is to give adults a permission to play and to not see it as childish. So one of the things that we do when we get to being about, 12 or 13, we start looking at adults, and our parents tell us, you're going to have to start seriously thinking about what you're going to do when you grow up, and you start having all these pressures. And so as we enter into adulthood, we start to let go of that desire or need to play, and we start trying to focus ourselves on work. Now what we're trying to do really is we're trying to say at this stage, probably a lot of us have had play as something we're not supposed to do and taken away from us, we'll say. And now you hear, leaders saying, oh, we need to play more. We need to play with ideas. We need to prototype. We need to fail. We need to learn from failure. And that's really difficult when we have been, rewarded for success, not for failure. And we don't really want to make a mistake, which is perhaps counterproductive to that whole idea of playing and taking risks. So what we're trying to do, I think, as a company, Strategic Play, is we're trying to reverse engineer adults. We're trying to say to them, look, it is your birthright to play. You have access to this. And if you can set yourself aside for a short period of time and lose yourself in a play process, you will be amazed at how much that will serve you going forward, not just for your ability to think better, but also your ability, your whole sense of self and how you feel and how you interact with others. All of that will benefit from taking a pause and playing.
Yeah, if I could just, I don't want to be the one to, I don't want to like rant on and on like I usually do. So please cut me off if I go over. Um, that point of uneducating ourselves from what school did to us as children is such an important point. And the most poignant example of that concept comes from the book Orbiting the Giant Hairball, where he talks about going into, I think it was like the first chapter, he talks about going into schools, the kindergarten, and asks who here is an artist. And, like all the kids raise their hands, right? Because everybody's an artist. If you do art, if you draw pictures, you're an artist. And there's no right and wrong to be an artist. It's just whether you are expressing yourself or not. And then he goes in first grade, second grade, and every year, fewer and fewer children raise their hands because we are trained to think about talent and intelligence as whether you do things right or not, which is kind of untraining people from the way that you need to think about innovation. There's no right way to solve every problem. There's just, it's an expressive art, right? And so you have to actually untrain that definition of intelligence that is, I have all of the answers in my head, which is a very, industrial age way of thinking about talent and intelligence, and much more think about like, I have the ability to express or to get those around me to express all of the possible, all the possible avenues that the answers might come from. So uneducating ourselves from the old paradigms is such an important aspect, which I really appreciate from play-based facilitated techniques.
Yeah, I'm gonna build off of that. If you're familiar, I'll come into the book Team of Teams. I was resistant to it for a long time, but the first chapter is gold as far as like a survey of kind of my field with the history of technology and that paradigm of industrialization where there's a right answer, and there's an optimal answer, and there's efficiency, right? If I know where I want to go, I can plot from here to there in a very efficient way, and that makes sense for a certain type of problem. That's tame and can be engineered. A puzzle with all nice edges and outer parts that you can figure out and then plot through. This is applicable to just a different type of more complex problem where we're not going to gather all the information and we're going to have to muddle through, as derogatory as that sounds. It's like when you had a skateboard with a kid when you're little and you're like, you were on a skateboard, they were on a skateboard, and like you pull them forward, then they pull you forward. And, in design, the understanding of the problem and the solution kind of emerge together. It's not this like, and now we'll gather all the information, and now we will assess all the things, and now we will help find the optimum efficient answer. It's just, and that is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us as just, for those of us that are military professionals, it's uncomfortable. I think it's uncomfortable for humans in general. But it is the only thing we can do. And we're kind of just lying to ourselves if we think post hoc that that's the way we solved problems in the past, because it's not. And I will caveat that to link to something that Jackie had said. Sometimes you just can't call play because they're going to reject it, right? Like you don't call it drawing, you call it marking paper with lines and things like that. Totally stole that from Jackie. but but you're doing those things. And so as a strategist, sometimes I think I'm not going to tell them I'm coming up with a playful strategy. I'm going to just show them that I think it works, because that's the way I think to get to the realizing this continuing advantage. But it's also difficult because those of us in the military are in the world of organized violence for political effect. And that is not something that we should do without some measure of trying to be efficient and using that judiciously. But I think in the long run, we could get there more easily if we are playful, as weird as that term is to use with something as important as military power.
Absolutely. Those are some great points. So I wanted to there's just a lot of methodologies circling, problem solving and innovation and how do we get those novel ideas to come out. So is there any other methodologies or problem solving methods that we can compare this to, or that it is enhanced?
I'll jump in here. I think that, and first I just want to say, Daniel, anything you want to say, we want to hear from you. I just love chatting with Daniel too. He's got tons of amazing insights that you should feel free to share. Okay, so I think that these, and I've heard, the expression that I got from TOGA, like the big tent of where all these things kind of hang out. And I do think that there is so many overlaps with different kinds of tools right now, or methods or applications that people are using. So for us with Lego Serious Play, just to kind of bridge the connection between play and then the next kind of thing, whether you're doing creative problem solving or design thinking, or even for those folks that live in the world of agile and are using agile project management, like all of these kinds of things have an interesting intersection. And I think that all of them are really pushing us to think about new and different ways and new and different approaches as we move forward in the way that we used to do things to the way that we could perhaps do things. And I think that the expression I would use is that as soon as we start allowing these tools to merge and to be used together, this is where we have the infinite possibilities of what could be. So, back in the day, I remember somebody saying, oh, Lego Serious Play, well, that's not creative problem solving. Like, and really, oh no, it totally is. Lego Serious Play is also about communicating. Lego Serious Play is also about prototyping and designing. It's really all of these things. And I would love it to get to a point where anybody who's doing facilitating, like how crazy would it be right now to go and do a facilitation workshop and not have, let's say, post-it notes or markers? And I'm talking about pre-COVID. So, you'd show up for a workshop and you're a facilitator, but you didn't bring a flip chart with you. Like, would that be unheard of? And so what I really would love to see is that all facilitators have all of these tools in their toolbox to be using, and including Lego Serious Play. Now, Lego is, you can't do Lego Serious Play without Lego. So you have to obviously have boxes of Lego to take with you, or to have them available in whatever kind of creative space you're working in. But I think that all of these things kind of hang out together. And I know that Stephen and I have spent quite a bit of time looking at new things and saying, hey, how could we Lego this up? Because as soon as we add Lego to what other application it is that we're working with, what we find is that people really like it. They gets their hand involved. So you get that little hit of adrenaline in order to be able to get, from a boring meeting to now a very exciting meeting. The thing I like most about the Lego is that it snaps together and it unsnaps so easily. And it's just a very easy tool to get people to use, much easier than getting people to draw a picture or make something out of clay or Play-Doh or whatever. People seem to be right away kind of wired to be able to put Lego together and take it apart and feel like that was creative. And so I think it lowers the threshold of what creativity is as people step into this space. So that's my 2 cents worth, but not to say that you can't use, pipe cleaners or glitter glue. Totally can. It just seems to be, for whatever reason, Lego seems to be an easier tool, or we say it's not Lego, it's not a toy, it's a plastic molded educational tool. That's what I always say that it is, because it seems to be easier for people to go, oh yeah, I know this is educational and I can use it, and okay, so then the barrier lowers. But as far as using it for any other methodology, try it. I think that's there's no rules, so see what you can come up with.
Awesome. So we have our first outer bowler entering the inner bowl, Joe Stallings. Welcome.
All right, thanks. So I wanted to ask a question or have a discussion a little bit. I don't know that I have too much to add, but my question in the chat was on how play can be used at more of a tactical or operational level, or is it only in a military use case? Is it only more at the strategy, the kind of design level, or can it actually be used at a real unit lower level?
Perfect. I think TOGA is gonna
So
response here.
Joe, it's good to see you, man. That's a good question. So I'll throw out a couple ideas. One is, almost by definition, the tactical level is more technical and precise, right? And it's a matter of training, where we know the strategic level is more about education and complexity as far as maybe complicated issues. But then there is a selection of which tool to use in the moment, and that selection itself can be more or less playful, I think. But I also, so break, semicolon, whatever. Another thought is that, there's lots of ways to teach things in a playful way, or to have people exercise certain practices that we could look at that are playful, to help them just do their normal daily things. And so I think it can be both within the box that we call tactics, and then it could be slightly outside of it on how those tactics are used. But that's a great question.
I'd just like to add, I'm going to push back on TOGA there a little bit about the tactical being precise, because in my experience, much of the complexity that we fail to navigate is at the team level. And it's around the idea of coherence and alignment to that larger strategic goal. And one of the things that I found really effective about this symbolic language, using symbolic language, that kind of speaks to some of those latent needs that we feel, which is what kind of like design thinking tries to get to, and that you get from visualization exercises, right, is tying my personal experience to what I'm supposed to do, both like how I'm supposed to align to this larger system, both strategically and culturally. And I just did a whole piece on this recently about artifacts and rituals. And one of the most powerful things that I did when I went through the Lego Serious Play exercise was one of these things where you envision yourself as part of this larger system, which is the team, which is part of a larger system, which is the organization, which has its own strategy, right? And forcing yourself to visualize in those ways at that symbolic level really helps you articulate and have deeper conversations about, what do we need to do next to get more aligned? And that was where, I definitely agree that, at the strategic level, that's the realm of kind of infinite possibility. But at the tactical level, there's kind of an internal infinite possibility there, which is, I might be, as a team member, struggling in an infinite number of ways to align to the culture and strategy of the team that I occupy, and navigating those conversations using a tool that is symbolic and kind of playful in nature helps to navigate those difficult conversations much better than our old social technologies, which is why I believe that my hypothesis is that a majority of people don't actually feel culturally or strategically aligned to the teams that they occupy. And that's why, when for the first time they do like a visualization or like a really psychologically safe facilitated experience, they're like, it's like a coming to God moment for them, where they're like, I didn't realize that I could feel this connected to the thing that we're trying to do. And you need that at the tactical level, right? Because that's how you get people to bring their whole selves to the mission.
So I take your pushback and I reframe it and I offer it back up as a gift of clarification. and I should know better than to say strategy or strategic without some sort of disclaimer. So I will flog myself later. But when I use the term, so thank you, because we often consider strategic to be a level of warfare or a part of the enterprise that is overarching. And I'm using it more in the sense that I think Jackie uses it as strategic play. And maybe she probably means both because she's clever like that. But it's the ability to abstract yourself from the task and then think about it more holistically. And that can happen at a very tiny level of a team. And obviously it happens at larger levels as well. So that's the strategic part I'm mentioning. But great points.
I'm going to just jump in because I think that the question that was asked, I want to take this to a very, very basic level of transferring knowledge. So when we're talking about anything, I always say, if you can make it more playful, that you're going to absorb it at a different level. So if I'm trying to teach you how to do something, if I can add play to it and make it more fun, then I think your ability to transfer that knowledge into your own framework, there's more opportunities to do it versus just following directions and doing what I ask you to do. So I'm just going to use this as a very simple example of one of the things that I think when we're trying to teach people or train people or share with somebody some kind of information that we really want them to know. And I'll use a policy and procedures manual. We have all had to go to policy and procedures manual training, which can be really boring. And we know we're supposed to follow. I mean, I think you guys might call it standing orders, but whatever you call that kind of training, which is maybe dry, then if you were to ask people to, after you have, let's say, read paragraph, one subsection, whatever, if you say, well, I want everybody now to think about that and build a small model that would explain what you think that meant, or tell me what you think is the most important part of this chapter of the book you just read, or you just heard Professor so-and-so give a presentation. Could you build a model of what you are curious about? That is a great way to do knowledge transfer, to take things from short-term memory, which is I just listened, I just read, I just heard, I just whatever, and then to think about how do I interpret that information, and then to build a model and to share it. So my argument would be that play and Lego serious play and any kind of playful approach, there's so many opportunities in the world that we live in to incorporate it. And we might think, and I think a lot of CEOs, if you ask CEOs, how important is creative problem solving, or how important is creativity, or how important is decision-making? They're like, that's important. Okay, well, how important is play? That's not important. That's for children. But the opposite is true, that play enables us to do those higher level functions that we want, that we're paying people for. We're not just paying people to, let's say, turn out widgets. We want them to understand the entire process, and we want to hear from everyone, because everyone has input within any kind of a structure of an organization to improve what that organization is doing. And if we can use play in order to transfer knowledge and then get feedback, this is how we create smarter organizations. That's my 2 cents worth on play.
I'd like to go back to Daniel. You brought Steve McKenzie's book, Orbiting Fishbowl, and I know Toga is a big fan of that book as well. And I'm seeing some similarities in a lot of things we're saying, and then referencing it to other methodologies as well. Do you feel like play and how we view play, because of what Gordon McKenzie talked about, what he experienced going and working in those elementary schools, do you feel that play is like an equalizer to, let's say, bureaucracy, a bureaucratic organization? Do you feel like a playful experience puts people more on the same level?
I think this actually ties directly into this thing that I've been ranting about a lot lately, which is the difference between tribes and institutions, right? So just as a really quick summary, there's this theory of the organization of humans, and it's called the TIMN framework. We organized initially into tribes, which can reach up to Dunbar's number, which is 150 people. And in tribes, we achieve coherence and alignment through verbal, through like we have conversations, right? And we interact with each other. And that's also kind of the level at which we share our art with each other. So there's this person-to-person small group coherence and alignment that happens in tribes. Then there's institutions, like when we reach to like agrarian society, we now have to scale information to these massive, quantities of people, also over longer periods of time, right? Because we need governments and we need a system to make sure that people are using the right currency. And so you end up with these institutional forms, and institutional forms are written and they last for a really long time, which means it's difficult for people to, through their personal experience, right? If I'm like a poor person in an economy where economists are saying the economy is great, my lived experience doesn't align to what the institutional forms are saying, right? Which means in order for me to feel coherent again with people, it has to happen on a tribal level. It has to happen in small group conversations. So what I think is that the thing that that's actually happening when you bring people into these small group play sessions is that they're achieving like that coherence and alignment on a much more like foundational, what we are built to achieve alignment to in conversations and in sharing symbolic forms of communication, as opposed to what most institutional forms do, which is I'm going to declare what reality is for these 200,000 people across the Air Force. And that you just kind of have to abide by that. And a majority of people are like, well, that doesn't really align with my lived experience, but I'll pretend, I guess. Right. So that's kind of the matchup. That's where I see the matchup between the play forms and those facilitated small group forms and what the institution does. But ideally, those should be overlaid on top of each other and inform one another and kind of achieve their own coherence between the different forms.
That's awesome. So thank you for the panel. I love that we're hanging out on that high level and really touching on a lot of applicability there. But I want to jump into some actual experiences that you've seen or experienced or you've hosted or facilitated that have led to, that are just great examples of how this can just elevate problem solving.
I've got a example that I can give, and I think one of the more, this is just kind of an incredible story. We were contracted to work with a very, very large European bank, and this bank had a 24-month project where they had to cut almost $1 billion out of their budget. I think it was something around $890 million. They were 18 months into the project and they hadn't made a single discussion. We flew in and we had a one-day session, and we actually lost almost the entire morning because they had an emergency that they had to go to attend to. So they came back basically after morning coffee break. And so that started our session, and using Lego series play and creative problem solving, by the end of the day, they had a project board where people were basically taking ownership and they were ready to basically start what they had to do. Their work was now in order. And this bank said, basically, if you had told us how much we were going to get done today, you could have basically named your price. And so this is just the power of having these two methodologies, that you have a system that you can work through, and then you have an ability to help people think and create and build. And at the end of the session, it's incredible, the outcomes. So that's kind of the first thing that jumped to my mind.
Yeah, and I can build on that. So Stephen's example is a good one, where people just weren't making decisions and time was ticking and resources were being wasted, and they weren't moving forward. But that story plays itself out over and over and over again, where teams struggle. And I think that creative problem solving and Lego series play are kind of like they're like perfectly married together, because the Lego really helps with the element of the communication and listening. And it also adds structure to the conversations. So in many cases, I think that people get into what we call a thinking stew, where they all come together, everybody talks, they often say the same things over and over again, and then there is no decision that's made and there's no outcome. So what we like to work on, we kind of joke and say the messier and more complicated the problem is, the better Lego series play works. So right now I've been working in healthcare because there are lots of I'm working right in California and I'm working locally, because the whole problem with the virus is a really good example of a messy, complicated problem. And I think what to say we're going to solve this problem, it's like a conflict. To say we're going to solve the conflict, to resolve the conflict, that might be the desired outcome, but really what the outcome can be is that we're managing it and that we're moving closer to having a deeper understanding and to be making good decisions along the way. And maybe they're good small decisions that then start moving us in a direction that is going to be safer, because the external environment is changing so quickly that we're really just sort of managing as we go. We're kind of like picking our way through the forest and trying to find the trail. So we have worked in, from everything from working with Procter & Gamble and helping them create the Swiffer product, which they credit us with helping them build on that technology that they had to create that $1 billion brand, to working with, let's say, a municipality and helping them work on issues of poverty. These are the kinds of problems that we're, or the kind of space that we hang out in, where we go in, and the best kind of people to work with are people that will say, what we're doing right now isn't working and we're ready to try something new. And that once we can get people to agree with that, then to try to use this approach can be incredibly powerful. But it's not us. It's not the facilitator that comes up with the answer. We're just taking a process. And I think that good facilitators know that when we go in, there is no silver bullet. We know we've got a big toolkit full of, and they may say we want to use Lego series play, or they may say we want you to teach us something. Whatever they say, it doesn't really matter, because we need to design something that actually drives the outcome. And what we'll do is we look at what their desired outcome is. Often we can take them way further than that desired outcome. And that's really where value lives. So they say they want this one thing, but we know we're going to give them way more than that. But we never overpromise. We'll underpromise and say, yeah, we can get there. And then all of the richness that comes along the way is what then gets them to say something like, you guys could have named your price. We had no idea that you were going to take us to this level. But that's kind of the space that we're hanging out in. And to give you industry examples, I think that banking and healthcare, municipalities and governments, but also large corporate companies are also working with us. We're working in so many different sectors that there's very few that we haven't actually hung out in. And we've written lots of case studies on, kind of like, we don't really write a case study to say exactly what we did, but just to give big, broad brushstrokes, because often we're under non-disclosure agreements. We can't really tell you everything. But that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of, it's really the facilitator that needs to go in and not own the problem and just facilitate the process and allow the wisdom in the room to have that opportunity to get to group genius so that they can then come up with their outcome.
So there's something I just want to tag on, which I think is related to something TOGA mentioned earlier, which is the team building aspects of this. Because I think, and something I've been thinking about is when people call you, they ask, can you facilitate like a 2-hour session for us, and so that we can solve a problem? And I'm like, well, I could help you have a conversation a little bit better, but what actually solves problems, this is something I've been thinking about, is when a group of people, ideally a diverse group of people, gets aligned to actually moving the ball forward on that problem and muddling their way through. And that team alignment aspect is such an important thing, that the facilitator themselves they're just making sure that the social technology allows for people to like create those artifacts together, right? And to like move it forward. But I think it can't be separated from the team aspects of it, and that like the continuity aspects as well. Because a good facilitated practice over a long term, what it does is it keeps a group of people consistently aligned to that ideal state. and to continue to keep working on it. And I think that shouldn't be kind of understated, is the those elements of making sure that everybody's on the same page and still motivated to continue to participate.
I think Toga has some final comments on that topic, and then we're going to get into the open discussion and possibly play. Toga?
Yeah, I'll just, I want to say kind of like the moment I became a believer in this. I mean, we mentioned kind of the tacit knowledge that it's hard to communicate and it's hard to, to transfer that knowledge. And I think social play is useful for picking up on those things, but more on an individual level, as we talk about building capacity as wayfinders, right? Like navigators have a map, they know how to get there. Wayfinders are hacking through the woods, like Jackie put it. And for me, Jackie has sent us off to go do something, and I'm like, must figure it out before I move my hands. And she's like, just go, let your fingers be the search engine and figure it out. And so I'm like, sure. So I'm on the way there, but I know what I want to build, right? And then my fingers start going. It's like, no, I'm going to build this, or I'm going to build that. And I'm like, I don't know how I got here from there. I can't explain it, which is not comfortable, right? Because you want to be able to explain how you got there. But every time I trust that process, good things come out of it. So thanks.
Awesome. No, thank you. So
I'm just gonna add. I know Nate is part of. Nate Swagler is on this chat here somewhere, and he said something to me ages ago, which I had never really even thought about, but have thought about it many, many times since. And that is when he was in a Lego session, he said to me, "Okay, I get it. So in design thinking, you interview, gather information first, and then you build. Whereas with Lego Serious Play, as Toga just said, you build first." And so it's that idea of trusting the hand-brain knowledge to believe that you're going to be inspired by the simple act of building. And just a little piece here that I think is so interesting. They've now proved that when babies build with Lego, everybody always buys their babies just those little wooden blocks, that it actually, by building a tower, develops brain stem cells. So if you think about the fact that that's one of the very first things we ever did was build a tower. And so to be able to kind of allow ourselves to go back and build in 3D and to just trust the process of picking things up with your hands. The Lego itself will inspire you to think about things in a new and different way. And in some ways, it's a bit of a forced connection. As you start to build, you're like, oh, now I see it. I always say to people, there are no accidents when you start building with Lego, because whatever you put together, there is something in that build that is going to help you to connect all the pieces and to put the story together, which is really the unknown coming out into the known for exploration, which is the power of that.
I had this aha moment during designing space, actually, when I was being asked to explain the drawing exercise that we were doing. And Jackie got to see me do this speech for several of our teammates, where we were doing this thing that Joint Special Operations University first introduced me to, which is having people draw something, even when it's something that's really complex and difficult to understand, like a series of movie scenes. And what I realized, like, I had this aha moment, which was when you just start making something, it forces you to think about how you're thinking about it. And by doing that, you start to analyze, that metacognitive aspect. You start to analyze, how else could I think about this? Which, like stepping outside yourself as like a being inside that complex system, it does. And what the aha moment I had was that this is exactly what Cynefin calls for in chaos, which is act, then sense, then respond. If you don't know what to do next, there's a good chance that you're confused. And so your state is kind of one of internal chaos. And one of the best ways that you can navigate your way out of that, just start drawing things. Or in the case of Lego Serious Play, just start building, because pretty quick, you're going to start to understand, oh, that's how I'm viewing this. And then you'll start to be able to think, oh, I could turn this sideways. I could look at it from somebody else's perspective, which is incredibly powerful, which is why I had this sudden realization that the visual thinking was way more insightful than just, like our verbal language, especially when you're dealing with I don't actually know how I think about this system. Well, start drawing it or start building it. You're going to figure out pretty quick what your point of view is.
Dan, that was perfect for wrapping up the interval discussion. Thank you for that ending comment. Before we move on, can everybody just turn on their video that is willing? We're going to just go into straight group. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. You're not just avatars and random accounts. You're actually there. Hello, welcome. Good to see you. Now imagine we're just all in a big room and we're just finally seeing you for the first time. All right, I'm gonna steal this from Toga. On the count of three, we're gonna do what's called the magic clap. And so we're all just gonna clap on the count of three, okay? 1, 2, 3. Yes, perfect. Okay, so there was so much awesomeness going on in the chat. And I just wanna give some people a chance to kind of rewind a little bit and ask the questions that they were asking in the group setting so we can make sure that we are connecting these methodologies and practices to you and your workplaces and giving you something to walk away with. So floor is open. If nobody speaks, I'll go back.
So I have some questions.
Perfect.
My name is Betsy Dickinson. I work for Aristocrat Technologies, which is a slot machine manufacturing company based in Las Vegas. And our mission is to bring joy to life through the power of play. However, we don't have any play in our organization. We don't have any fun in our organization. I mean, granted, we've got creative people who are bringing cool games to market, but we're really losing or have lost, or maybe it's never been, kind of just a fun atmosphere. So I'm wondering how you translate from Lego serious play to bring that that mindset forward.
Jackie, do you have some Legos?
I do. That's a great question, Betsy, because in even your kind of explaining what kind of a company you're coming from. I did a tour of a company that was in a marketing, and they had a very similar motto, I guess we'd call it. And they had a ping pong table and a pool table, and all the pictures on the walls were all of like Monopoly games and all kinds of things. And at first I thought, oh my goodness, these guys are really playful. But then I really discovered they weren't at all. They were very competitive. And so I think that competitive play, it can be an element of play, but we've learned that there's really only one, it only serves one function of play, to compete. And so it's not necessarily for everyone. So to bring play into, we've got some Lego bricks. How many people have got some Lego bricks handy that they might be able to play with?
Oh my goodness, look at all those.
And Cash, just so that you know, I can't see anybody on my screen anymore. I can only see myself. I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm gonna just run you through a little activity. So if people could grab some Lego bricks, if you have them handy, I know some of you do. I'm just gonna put this out that we'll give you about a minute to grab those Lego bricks and build any kind of an animal that you can. So just grab some bricks and build an animal out of your imagination. It can be anything you want. So I'm just going to give everybody like a minute to build something with their Lego.
Okay, Jackie, as I'm building this thing, we are at 11 past the hour, and I see 3 questions. And so let's just make sure we have time for that. And I have no idea what I'm building, but I'm trying to build a duck.
Okay, a duck is good. All right, and maybe now we'll just like do some show and tell. If you've got something that you can show us. And again, I can only see my screen, so I'm not really sure what's happened, but I built this. So this is what I built. And I'm going to say this is a giraffe. I just built a giraffe out of some Lego. And I want to see what other people, if other people can show us what they built. Maybe Stephen, can you help me? Because I can't see anybody's screen.
Do you have a box in the upper right corner that says view?
Yeah,
If you click on
okay.
that,
No,
I think I'm saying that Nate built some kind of mechanical flying animal. Yes. I don't.
No,
All right.
Nate,
okay,
good job.
if Stephen or somebody
drew.
could maybe ask people to tell us what they built. Okay, so I'm just going to
Jackie, I
jump
built a
in and
duck.
say that to add more play into your organization right now, the first thing that you can start with is next time you have a staff meeting, just put Lego on the table. Just do it. Just take a bunch of Lego with zero purpose. If people walk in and go, why is there Lego on the table? Just say, oh, I just thought, we'd add a little bit of Lego and you can play with it if you want. And then just don't even try to get them to build anything. Just continue on and run your meeting. You'll find that by the end of the meeting, people will have picked up Lego and they will have made all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that we know is that when people are playing or fiddling, we call it, with the bricks, just like snapping it together without any kind of purpose, it actually opens up a roadblock in the back of their brain to pay better attention to the meeting. So this is the opposite of what you may have learned when you were a kid, when the teacher said, don't play with the stuff in your desk. All of us probably, when we're at a boring meeting, will take notes, not because we're ever going to read them again, but just because it helps us to pay attention. So if you can put Lego on the table and just not have anything other than the Lego on the table as a starting point and just see how people react to that. And I think that Lego is better than those squeaky toys or silly things that people throw. Just Lego bricks on the table and just see what happens. And what you might discover is that you have a much better meeting. So that would be my first suggestion for anyone who doesn't have a playful environment to make it a little bit more playful.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
It looks like we have two people with hands up. I think we're in a non-hands up kind of mode at this point. Is that right, Cuss? It's just kind of open. I don't know. Did Cuss freeze on us?
Yeah, well,
David or Nate, you want to come off?
am I
mute?
freezing on you guys?
Yeah, you're a little choppy right now. David, it looks like we're having some audio troubles with you as well. If you can drop your question or comment into the chat, we could try and get to it before our time is up. I'm going to ask for Nate at this point. Did you have something, Nate?
Quick mic check. How do I
Hey,
sound?
you're good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Jackie, Stephen, Toga, thanks for being on the inside of the fishbowl. Quick qualifier. Jackie and Stephen are the ones who trained me in Lego Serious Play several years ago up in Whistler, and I've been using it ever since. And this was before I started working at SOCOM. Now at JSOW, I'm known as the guy who brought Lego into the building, and courses and teams around the organization haven't been able to stop using it since. So completely agree with almost everything I've heard so far today, and just great to see everybody again. Real quick, I know Toga had mentioned something about not having to think about what you want to build before you build it. And Jackie sort of built on this concept as well. And I remember a line that I heard during the training when I originally worked with Jackie and Stephen, and it was this idea that serves really well as a prompt if you are going to be facilitating a meeting, and that is, don't hold a meeting with yourself. Don't force yourself to have to think about what you want to create before you give yourself a chance to just snap bricks together and to make. So alleviating yourself of that burden of intention allows for that sort of kinesthetic serendipity to happen between your hands and the rest of your mind. It's really uncomfortable for people, or for most people, I think, to behave that way. But after they've done it, they realize the benefits of it. So maybe tuck that line in your back pocket for any aspiring facilitators out there. Just encourage people not to hold a meeting with themselves. And the last thing I'll say is, we have a wide variety of students at JSOW, officers and enlisted. And I think LEGO has a fun way of, independent of what industry you're working in, it's a great equalizer in the sense that everybody gets to participate, everybody gets to play, et cetera. And it doesn't matter where you're from or sort of what your educational or rank structure is, et cetera. And the example I'll offer up comes from a gig I did with the professional baseball team here, the major league team in Tampa, the Rays. And there was a guy in one of our workshops who worked in the concessions, like a lower level position, makes slightly better than minimum wage. But he built a 3D model of a concession stand inside the baseball stadium. And when he had his opportunity to tell his story about what he had built, the management team and the leadership, like 10 levels higher than this guy in the organization, were looking at his model and sort of nodding along politely as he began to tell his story, only to then follow up with his build. He had done this really clever thing where he showed how people move through the line and they get their food and then they pay here. So he'd sort of built like a process map out of Lego, but then he turned it. And then from this perspective, you'd see another person's experience. And then you turn it again and you'd see another person's experience, and everything lined up. So this guy had a capability to think in 3 dimensions that no one else could. Everyone else thought his story ended with the one kind of fixed perspective, but he ended up being an extraordinary sort of thinker and builder. But it was the only thing he had said all day. Like, no one had given this guy any credit or thought about him as being sort of anything more than the guy who runs the concession stand. But that mind-blowing thing ended up changing the arc of the conversation and of that meeting. So I think of Lego as a great equalizer, and completely concur with Jackie in that leaving them out on the table can tell you a ton about your participants, who waits for permission or sort of asks if they can play with them versus who opens the bag and starts digging in, right? Like, you can learn a lot about people and about the, sort of creative potential in the room just by putting some bricks out to play. So with that, I'll break. Thanks, everybody.
Man, that's
Thanks,
amazing.
Nate.
Yeah. And part of one thing that really stands out to me about that I think about with my, brief foray into Lego series play is this idea that in ordered, this kind of comes from Kinevin a little bit, but in ordered systems, what's most important is understanding all the components. But in complex systems, what's most important is how those things relate to each other. And there's this constant, when you're doing play and you're doing visualization, the thing that you end up with is a relationship map. It's not a static, it's this step and then this step and then this step, or it's like, oh, if we just level out the incentives, then our culture we could just manage it with these massive levers, right? When you actually start to think about information in relation to other information especially when you start to take in other points of view, that's a much more useful starting point for navigating complexity than just, here, I got a database of all the information. It's a much more sense-making approach, that relationality.
So I want to give Hammer a chance to ask his question or contribute to the conversation. This man has been a big, huge mentor for a really big part of my professional life. So Hammer, you got a minute to jump in?
All right. Can you guys hear me? I don't know. I didn't have any Legos here, but I did try to create something with a stapler, my phone, a calculator, a brush. It's like a cat laying on its side, I guess. So I'm trying to be involved here. But I love the conversation. I want to offer just a couple things to think about. One example, hopefully. But a lot of the stimulus or the catalyst for these conversations is trying to fix a problem, something that's broken or wrong. And I guess I would force everybody to think that don't just wait for something to be broken to go provide this, add Lego play to what you're doing. There's a lot of mundane tasks in everyday life and businesses in multiple different industries that we can add stimulation to, that we can make more playful. The example I'll share is a C-17 HSC process. It's a home station check, and I was very proud to be part of a unit that had one of the best examples of the most efficient process for the C-17 to be able to turn that aircraft back out from an inspection, a 1 to 3 day inspection series, back out to the line and get it back in the lineup and flowing. But one of the things that we were trying to do, it wasn't Lego play, is we were trying to provide more direct feedback to the technicians that were doing this work that becomes very repetitive, becomes mundane, and that's where complacency seeps on in. So we were working with some VR, AR gogs to try to animate some of the aircraft itself, and then working with a gaming company that's a software design and gaming company out of Silicon Valley to basically, if you would, mentally visualize with me the silhouette of an aircraft, and you have all these inspection requirements at different phases of the aircraft. So your engines are one section inspected by a group of technicians. Your electrical environmental is another section. Your flight deck is another section. So it's the best process in the Air Force, but how can we make it better by animating those mundane inspection requirements? How can we provide direct feedback in a gaming type mechanism? Think of just virtual feedback that comes back visually that shows when a technician has completed 1 through 20 of a 120 step inspection process. And now maybe it greens up, or it provides positive feedback to that technician, but also captures who did it, how fast they did it, where their snags were. So it becomes a feedback mechanism to continue to better that process. And some of the comments about that, this really is an exercise in building relationships in teams. Well, those teams can then share each other's successes there and look for where they have opportunities to help their teammates out that one might be struggling in this particular area. So everything you guys are talking about is so incredibly important. And I look at this as a talent retention tool, not only to bring I'm using military examples, but bringing in effective, hungry service members that want to selflessly serve. But once we get them in, how do we give them the tools to keep that talent in and keep that talent thinking, not just teaching them what to learn, but how to learn and improve how they think about solving tomorrow's future problems and challenges that we haven't even thought about yet. Maybe Toga has. He's been to a lot more school than I have, but this is just, this conversation is so important, and I just appreciate you. Cuss, thanks for inviting me to be part of it.
Absolutely. No, and that's a great practical use for the conversation. So it looks like we're getting close to the end here. I just want to say thank you to this panel for showing up today, for talking, for engaging, and the Outer Bowl. Thanks for all you guys. I see the chat has just been going crazy, and all the contributions. And even if you just chimed in and listened, thank you. This is the 4th Fishbowl that we've done, and we've already grown to this big crowd. So we're so happy with that. Thanks, Daniel, for starting Agitare in the first place and getting us all talking about these relevant topics. We're trying to make the Agitare Fishbowl better and to get a greater reach and to continue to bring up these relevant topics. And we're hoping that this framework will allow us to continue to do that. So, but the way we get better is through feedback. And so I'm going to drop a survey link in the chat, and I'm going to actually end us a little bit early just to give you just a little bit of time to give us that feedback. And we're going to use that, and we will completely change the construct based off of the things that we see and hear from you. So last comments, anybody from the panel or otherwise?
Thanks. Go play.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much for being interested in the power of play and for creating this space. And I love David getting the stapler and all the stuff together in order to be part of it. That is exactly what it's all about. Someone told me they didn't have Lego, but they were trying to build with Fig Newtons. And I'm like, perfect, even Fig Newtons work. So there you go.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for showing up, and especially thanks to Cuss and Michael Harbin for putting this one together, and Chris and all of the rest of the Agitare team who are kind of taking the initiative and doing what we're hoping to, which is get community members to create events that are, democratizing, popularizing, empowering, some of these interested parties across the defense community to try these things within their various contexts. Events like this are, in my opinion, kind of Agitare doing exactly what I hoped it would do, pulling all these people together and giving them a forum to connect with other people so that they can run experiments on their own within their specific context. And it has widened our network. I met Jackie through an event that TOGA threw, which was designing space. So the power of that network, to Betsy's point, one of the things that I think is the most important thing to consider when you talk about changing culture, start by building community around that, start by building a coalition of people who are aligned to that same idea. Once you have that team, then get them aligned to what the next steps are. Just small experiments, and then just keep trying things. So thank you, Cuss, for really championing this thing and knocking it out of the park with this event. And I look forward to seeing you all on our Slack, and that's where we're most active, on LinkedIn. And feel free to reach out to any of us at any point with any questions or suggestions or ideas.